What's up, fam? It's your favorite certified transformational nutrition coach, David Wizicki, and this is Man to Man, a wellness series where we chop it up with other brothers to get their insight on how to go from hellness to wellness. Today, we are tapping into the mental wellness of it all. And this brother in particular is a multi award winning podcaster, and he's just coming off a hot Webby Award win for his show Black is America. He's also an entrepreneur, Army vet, husband, father. Please give it up for the one, the Dominic Lawson. What is up?
I am living a dream, David. Thank you so much for the opportunity and to have me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And congrats on the Webby Award, the first of many.
I appreciate that. It was surprising, but I still definitely worked really hard for it. So it's like it's surprising, but it's not surprising. But I
Right, right.
appreciate that sentiment for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
hmm
As usually is the case, we always have some interesting fellas on here. So there are a ton of directions to go into just off of your intro alone. However, we're going to start it the way we always start it, getting you man to man blue check certified. I think you know this question. So all I'm going to ask is, are you ready for that question?
I I am ready, sir.
All right, Dominic, what does masculinity mean to you?
Whew. Masculinity to me means being comfortable in your own skin. I think a lot of times when it comes to, what a man is, masculinity, stuff like that, a lot of people like to define what that is, and they're usually not yourself, right? Because,
Sure.
you know, being a man is just like being black. It's not a monolith, right?
Right.
I can remember growing up as a teenager, in my bedroom, singing to NSYNC and Backstreet Boys because I thought the music was cool. That's just real talk, right?
Right.
I thought it was cool. Justin Timberlake coming from the Memphis area, so there's that connection,
There you
right?
go.
But
Hmm, hmm.
but I think just being comfortable in your own skin and that you get to define what masculinity is. I tell people all the time that, like, look, I can help, put something together and build something, but at the same time, I can go, cook dinner and do these other things, right? That are appear to be, of feminine nature, which, is subjective, when it
Right.
comes to a lot of things, right? But that's what masculinity means to me. Just defining what that is for myself and being comfortable in my own skin. Yeah.
No, I love it. I love it. You got the check. You are in.
Nice.
There
Hey, got to get that check. That's
you go.
important. That's important.
Now, I'd love, I mean, again, in terms of all the different ways to get started, I guess we'll start from the beginning of your
hmm
journey. Now, you know, so it's been said technically you were raised by a single mother. Um, you also noted, however, your dad was all around. So there was some level of co-parenting. I want to
Absolutely.
ask what that was like for you, in particular, growing up in the Black South, Memphis, in the Lamar Terrace projects. And, there is an well, I'll let you tell it, and we'll
hmm
go from there. But it's always interesting to me. We had someone recently that's coming up in a future episode where we spoke about tough upbringing, tough environments, and in his case, in my case, in many other men's cases, but in that in particular, for the better ultimately. But it's all a matter of you. It's all a matter of how you take those experiences, and you can keep them as negative, or you can, as we hear, some people wax poetic, turn the negative into a positive. So I'd love to hear your insights on that.
Sure. So, like I said, I grew up in the Bible Belt South, Memphis, Tennessee, and
Yeah.
like I said, my mom was a single parent. She got pregnant with by my dad, like senior year of high school. All
Okay.
right. And so my dad had a scholarship to go to school, but once, mom found out that she was pregnant with me, he decided, to stick around and help take care of me, which, even from the time that, I wasn't even born yet, that has always, made a big impression to me, and not just about who my dad is, but what he felt like responsibility was, and
Mm,
defining that for me. And I've kind of followed that model, as a man and as a father, as well. But yeah, it was interesting because, like I said, while my mom was technically, by all definitions, whatever, was a single parent home or whatever, my dad was there all the time. Like he would
okay.
come by, to take me out to eat, or I spend the night over his house a lot of times and stuff like that. There's even a story where, so here in Memphis we used to have this amusement park called Liberty Land, right? So it was like,
Okay.
it's nowhere not like Six Flags or anything, like just a nice little amusement park here in Memphis. And so we was all ready to go, and this, that, and the other. And I have a little sister who was fathered by a different gentleman, and I'm getting ready to go with my dad, and the other. And my dad was like, "Hey, what is your sister doing this weekend?" It's like, I don't know, man. Like, that's not, this is my sister. I love her, but I mean,
Sure.
she's doing her own thing. She's doing mom. It's like, okay, she's coming too. And so, again, like, even though my sister didn't belong to him, he felt a need and a responsibility to be like, even though I'm his, that she should have some fun too, and that she should have a little bit of that, that father figure in her life as well, because her dad was quite the opposite. I'll just say
Mm,
that, quite the opposite of my dad, and not the best of people. Just
sure.
call a spade a spade. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Uh, but that's always been a big impression on me as well. And then there's another quick story about, and I tell this on a podcast of how, the co-parenting kind of worked.
Mm,
So it was like, I think it was March or May of 1991, and this is when the Rodney King thing happened, the beating on TV and stuff like that, right?
right.
And my mom, said, "Hey, when you get out of school, come straight to school." Because me, I would usually, hit up the candy lady, play with my friends or whatever. But she's like, "Come straight home from school." And
Mm,
when I came home from school that day, my dad was there as well, and then we had to talk. And so in the
mm,
Black community, as you know, David, we had to talk. This wasn't the birds and the bees talk. This
sure.
was how to interact with the police
Yeah.
type of talk.
Yeah.
And so she thought it was really important to have both of us, I mean, both of them there to have that conversation, which just says a lot of my dad, as far as like what it means to be a dad, what it means to be a father, what it means to be there for your kids, for your family, even if that family doesn't look like the prototypical mom, dad, picket fence, 2.5 kids type of model, right? But he's always showed up, and he still shows up today. He's still giving me advice, still like, I don't know, Dominic, maybe we should go in this direction or something like that. Just being a dad, but
Sure.
that's always made a massive impression on me as a father and stuff.
Hmm.
Mm.
Well, I mean, thank you for sharing that. I think there's something powerful. What either parent, just a parent's presence and knowing that they will be there, they will be present. Mom or dad. But I think for us, for men in particular, having that dad role model around, just knowing that he's around, knowing that you will get those tidbits to this day
Right.
and those
Absolutely.
insights, right? That there's something of a comfort, there's something of a way of conversations that just wouldn't that you wouldn't have with your mom, that you wouldn't have with anybody else but that type of figure in your life, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you mentioned that, because, like, let me be clear. My mom was an all-world mom. Like, she was pulling Christmas presents out of nowhere. Like, "Mom, I know you don't make that much money. Like,
Right.
how are you able to get this Super Nintendo? How did you pull that off?" Right?
Right.
Uh, but at the same time, though, my mom was always like, she would go right up into the cliff as far as like, what she need to show me, this and the other. But even she knew, like, okay, this is where your dad needs to step in. And so my dad being available to me in that regard has been, huge. just to say the least. It's been huge, and I'm super appreciative to both of them to having that conversation, whatever conversation that looks like, because co-parenting can be rough. Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
it can be
I can imagine.
rough, right?
Yeah.
You know, there's past, like, relationship stuff that probably could have that happened, and bad sentiments towards one another and stuff like that, but whatever it was, they figured it out. And even when my dad got married to my stepmom, they had a conversation. So there's this third party that's kind of in the process as well, but whatever they did, whatever conversation they had, all three of them,
Mhm.
I'm super grateful, and I've turned out for the best for it. And growing up in the Lamar Terrace projects, I needed that. I needed that. I was that kid that could have easily gone the different direction, which I
Sure.
know sounds cliche, but it's just true. It's just true, right?
Yeah.
And so for them to be there to kind of steer me in that direction, because this is early '90s. This is crack cocaine, drug dealing, no public housing.
Yeah. Yeah.
All types of crazy stuff goes down, and so for them to have that conversation and to be there for me has been pivotal, for sure.
Was there anything in particular that kind of stood out to keep you kind of within the guardrails of kind of staying on the straight and narrow versus kind of, veering out, and to your point, could have been just another statistic?
Honestly, for them, it was the reinforcement of how education was important, but not just important, but cool, right? Because one
Hmm.
of the things they always did was expose me to different things, right? Like, hey, you're great at math, Dominic. Let me go show you. Let's go to this fair where math is super important. Like, hey, I see that you like science or something. Let's go to this museum so I can show you where the science, where I know it seems boring right now, but it can be applicable later on. And so, and I'll never forget this. My mom took me to the Memphis Children's Museum here in Memphis. Obviously,
Okay.
sorry the redundancy,
No,
but
no.
here in Memphis, took me to the Memphis Children's Museum, and where I would see all these cool and amazing things. And she's like, hey, see, this is where the stuff that you're learning now is just the groundwork to do all this cool stuff
Hmm.
later. And so it was honestly just double downing on the education, but not just talking about it, but showing me and exposing me to different things that could be applicable as well to what I do now.
Hmm. I love that. I love that. And
Hmm.
and then so, all right. So kind of transitioning a little bit here, because I want to continue the journey of Dominic Lawson. So you manage to stay on the straight and narrow, and eventually you end up in the army. As I mentioned at the
Hmm.
top, in introducing you, you're an army veteran. Um,
Absolutely.
so now you come out of these challenging times. You come out of this challenging environment. You kind of get yourself into another challenging environment of some sort, right? For
Hmm.
some, it's just not the thing, and some folks would never consider it. But then I know growing up where I grew up, you had a lot of recruiters that were around in certain neighborhoods and said, "Oh, this is the way. If you don't have any other way,
Which
that's
is
the
very
way."
targeted, by the way, but that's
Oh,
another conversation for another
absolutely.
day. So,
Yeah, but that's
so.
why. Yeah, that's why I said certain neighborhoods, uh, low income, melanated
Hmm.
type of neighborhoods, and so for you, going and transitioning into the army life, and then coming back into the civilian life, I know everyone has a different story, a different outcome, a different experience. How was it for you?
Um, so going into the army, it was always, a sense of service for me. Like,
Hmm.
and that's something that my parents had always instilled in me, even though while we live in public housing and it's not the greatest of circumstances,
Right.
but you still give back, so we,
Hmm.
we did soup kitchens and stuff like that. We volunteered and stuff like that. That was always there. And so the next step was for me just felt like military service, serving a cause bigger than yourself. And to be fair, David, I bought into the dream of like, serving your country, this, that, and the
Yeah.
other. And I still believe in certain aspects of that.
Sure.
But as you get older, you learn certain things like, okay, maybe certain things aren't such an up and up, like we talked about earlier about those targeted neighborhoods, right?
Correct.
And so, but leading up to that, I did 4 years of ROTC in high school. I was Mr. ROTC,
Huh.
color guard, rifle team, drill team,
Wow.
land
Okay. All
navigation.
right. All right.
I was trying to do all the things, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But so enlisted in the army, and it didn't go as planned originally because I went into basic training, and I got a heart condition.
Hmm.
I had it was a like rare thing. I got a like common cold turned into a viral infection of the heart, and so that's where things kind of took a turn. And it's like, well, Dominic, thank you for your service, but you can't stay here.
Huh.
Right. So imagine, thinking about like, for a big part of your life, this is what you're supposed to be. This is what you're supposed to become.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, just one random cold and all of that just goes away.
Yeah.
Right. Now I'm grateful for Uncle Sam because he gave me some nice parting gifts, and stuff like that, as far as like healthcare and stuff like that. But still,
Sure.
it's like, it wasn't the plan, right? And so there was a lot of things that came from that. Depression was one of them for
Hmm.
sure. Like, and
Hmm.
we're talking about like, and that's the thing about depression. It looks like a whole bunch of different ways, right? Like depression
Absolutely.
isn't just this one particular thing. And for me, it was literally, David, no lie, staying in a dark room all day playing Grand Theft Auto. That was depression for me. Like
Yeah.
just sitting in a room, dark room, playing video games and stuff like that. And then around this time, I was married to my first wife. We have a kid,
Wow.
and it was just a lot at the same time.
Yeah.
But you know, depression is quite the beast, man. It's one of those things. It's like quicksand. You know what I mean? You think
Hmm.
you're doing okay one day, and another day is just kind of like, nope, fit to go and sit in this dark corner and just play video games all day. And really, like the highlight of my times was like when the next game came out. Like that was the highlight. Like nothing else.
Yeah.
Like, and keep in mind, I got a wife, I got a kid, but that was the highlight of my life. Just like when's the next game? And so,
Yeah.
that was a pretty dark time, and I'm glad I came through it. But it's just one of those situations where it's just like, it was rough, to say the least. It was rough.
Can I ask what was your light? I mean, I have many of stories that I can share on depression personally, and I have in
Hmm.
previous episodes. I can share one with you as well. I mean, to your point of that dark room, video games, a new video game being your highlight, right? You're out. For me, at my lowest point, I will say, yeah, I was in bed all day. You could not get me out of that bed. The only thing that got me out of bed, I have no shame, at this point in saying it. They had reruns on, I don't know what it would be called today, but locally in New York, Channel 11, WPIX, people my age range would know what that means. They had reruns of Beverly Hills 90210. So every time I heard that, da-na-na-na, da-na-na-na,
Hmm.
that would be my out. And I think there was something for me being in New York, being in the fog that I was in, the dark, clouded environment that I was in, where I just was seeing no hope. I had this hope of this, this dreamy environment on the West Coast, and them just kind of living it up in high school and doing all the cool things. And they're by the Pacific Ocean and the beach, and they're just yucking it up. And yes, they get into trouble, but they have these amazing parents that come to console them at the end of the day. I don't know. That must be why that was the show. So at 5 o'clock p.m., that's when it would air the rerun. That's when I would have some life, and that would give me life. And then 6 o'clock, it was over. It was done, because now it's time for evening news and all of that nonsense and every other thing that was going on in my life. So I would start my day at 5 p.m. Most days, and yeah, man, it's a trip. It's a trip. There's even times where I had this functional depression, where you can do enough. You can do enough to get by. I
Right.
want to bring it back to you in what was the moment? What was there something that just switched in your head where that switch went on and was like, I got to do something? Did someone say something to you? How did you get out of that?
So anybody who plays Grand Theft Auto knows that like you can run red lights and stuff like that, right? So there's that.
Yeah.
Like I'm getting there, right? And so I literally had to go to the store or something, like physically go to the store, right? And so I almost ran a red light because my mind was so like ingrained of like, like of the word, like, okay, whoa, almost no, because I almost got T-bone, right? Like, whoa, okay, that's yeah, this is I got to get help
Hmm.
because like I'm gonna end up killing myself, killing somebody I love. Like keeping, I got like like a 9-month-old baby at the time, right?
Wow.
A son, right? So it's like, what if he was in the car,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That would have been problematic. So it was that moment like, yeah, I got to get you help, And so that was my first instance of like going to see a therapist and stuff
Okay.
like that, and talking about things. And I think I'm around 25, 26 at this time, right? And I guess kind of like that second light, if you will, was we was having a conversation. I was like, look, I had this plan for my life. I was supposed to do this. I was supposed to do that. I was supposed to go to the army and serve 20 years and then retire and then figure out another aspect of my life. But now here I am, 25, 26 years old, and I feel like it's done. I've already done that part. So it's like, I don't
Yeah.
know what to do. It's too early.
Yeah.
And she just basically told me, like, look, you're 26 years old. Like, there's so much more life out there for you to
Yeah.
figure out. It's not over. It's not done. You're not an old adult, if you will. And
Yeah.
so I think those two instances where it just kind of clicked, like, yeah, there's got to be something else. There's got to be
Mm,
something else. And
mm.
so, yeah, that was pivotal for me. Yeah.
Yeah. It sounds like it. It sounds like it. Did you go when you went to a therapist? Just one more thing on. Well, two more
Yeah.
things on therapy. One, when you went
Sure.
to therapy, were you solely focused on your depression and working through that, or were there these other these other variables? I just have to ask again because I was born and raised in New York and the surrounding East Coast, and only recently did I come out to LA. But I know New York and LA is a lot different from the South. The racist South, the projects of the South, so on and so forth. You know where I'm going with this. And again, with
Hmm.
your upbringing, what was that part of the dialogue at all, but between you and the therapist?
It's interesting. And so because that instance of therapy and then the instance of therapy I go in now, that part of it wasn't really addressed,
Hmm.
right? Like the
Okay.
part of like growing up and stuff like that. That I've been talking more about that now because of
Okay.
recent things and stuff like that that I've been kind of aware of and stuff like that. But then it was honestly about like having this plan for my life and it not going how I thought it would be. It was also some of the conversations and the things that were going on with my wife at the time, which is why she's now my ex-wife,
Ah.
right? So there's that stuff, right?
Yeah. Sure.
And so there's a little bit of like domestic violence there, at me being on the receiving end, right? A lot of times people
Hmm.
don't think about
My
men being on the receiving end of domestic violence,
correct.
but that is very much a thing, right?
You just had
And
my
so
eyebrows raised, so that's why I
yeah,
was like, okay, wait a minute. I
yeah,
was like, Dominic,
yeah.
what happened there? Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah. Wow.
yeah. So there's instance of that abuse as well, and receiving that
Hmm.
abuse and feeling less than a
Yeah.
man, if you will,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So there's that part. So those are some of the stuff. So that was some of the stuff that was coming up at that moment.
Wow.
So usually therapists they usually try to go underneath, but we weren't there yet. We didn't get to that
Sure.
part, but it was
Sure.
just those things. But yeah, those things were that's what was going on at the time. Yeah.
Wow. Well, you bring up therapy now that you are going different
Hmm.
reasons, but you are going, and it sounds like you are in fact one of the many that I speak to that are advocates for therapy. As you nod your head, more than
Right.
convincingly so. Um, I'd like to ask. you something. And again, if this gets too sensitive, we will divert. But there is one thing in the notes that I just, I feel for being a dad. I know you're a dad. And I guess I'll preface by asking, do I say for you, uh, a father of three, or do you consider yourself a father of four?
I consider myself a father of four.
Because there's there's a friend in Kariga Bailey on Soul Affirmations podcast who's been on this show multiple times, and yeah, he considers himself an angel parent. And I always want to be sensitive to that because I'm never, I again, in the research I saw it, but I want
Of
to be
course.
sensitive to you. Um, and I can, as we talk about therapy, and I can have certain assumptions about, therapy helping in this way. And I can only imagine, again, that loss and how you had to deal with your son passing. I believe it was like 6 days later.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, how was that for you with that loss? With the gain of other your three other beautiful children, and ultimately being a beautiful, a proud dad of four amazing
Right.
ones. Like, I mean, just that journey, if you can like touch on that
Yeah,
a little bit.
absolutely. So this is around 2015. It's around 2015, March of 2015. And my wife had been pregnant for about, my current wife now had been pregnant for about 6 months now. And this is around the time where we're building the business. You know how entrepreneurship is. It's go, 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 hustle, this, that, and the other, right?
Yeah.
But that also led to some complications in the
Hmm.
pregnancy.
Got
And
it.
so to the point where my wife had to be on bed rest for like the last 2 weeks. And then it got to the point where she went to one of those routine checkups, like, we have to deliver today. And honestly, we don't know how this is going to turn out. So on March 6th, 2015, give birth to my beautiful son, Maximus. And then 6 days later, he passes away. And during those 6 days, David, were indescribable, to
I'm
say the
sure.
least.
I'm sure.
They're just, terrible.
Yeah.
Because it is just one of those things where um, you're not really sure what's going on. You hear all these boops and beeps of like medical machines and devices and stuff like that. And it just got to a point where it's like, look, man, if you're gonna take my son, just take him. Okay,
Hmm.
like, don't put him through this crap. Like,
Yeah.
don't put us through this crap. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
if you're gonna do it, just do it, right? And that was a point, David. Real talk. Like, me and God was beefing. It is what it is.
I
We
believe
was
I
beefing,
Yeah.
right? It
Yeah.
is what it is, right? I
Yeah.
hope that was, maybe it sounds blasphemous, but that just is what we were beefing. Because I was angry. I was angry, and I wasn't just angry for myself, because my wife currently, she lost both of her parents when she was young, right? So
Wow.
I'm also angry for her, right, to
Sure.
have to endure this loss. You know what I mean? And so it just got to a point where it's like, look, man, if you're gonna take him, just take him, right?
Hmm.
So March 12th comes around, he passes away, and I just, lost for words, and I think honestly, and I'll, try to be, uh, a bit sensitive here. Um, I think what really got to me, because we had always planned to nurse, right? No formula and stuff like that. So when I see my wife, who I love dearly, still have to pump milk for a baby that's not here,
Yeah.
like that just does something to
Yeah.
you. That's just like, like, now me and God gotta have a different conversation, because
Sure.
I'm like,
Sure.
come holler at me, God, because
Yeah.
this that's what we doing, but those, and I don't mind talking about this, and I'm glad you asked, because I think it also just speaks to the power of therapy. Because, like,
Yeah.
if this was like maybe a year or two after the fact, like, nah, we ain't having this conversation, right? But a few years removed, I can have this conversation. And every March, we get a little squirrely and wily because it's that time of year.
Yeah.
But the reason I say I am the father of four is because I still brought him home. I still brought him home. Put him in an urn, stuff like that. Still talk to him, stuff like that. And so that's why I say that. Like I still talk to him. I still care for him. I still speak of him
Yeah.
as he's in the physical form. But man, it's the darkest days. I always say March 12th is the day the earth cracked. Like that.
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah.
I equate that to. But
Yeah.
uh, how I got over that, or how we got over that, is honestly, me and my wife, we just focused on each other. Like,
Hmm.
don't focus on my own feelings as any other. Just make sure she's okay. Make sure I'm okay. She'll make sure I'm okay, and that's how we got through that. That's how we
Hmm.
got through that.
That's powerful. Thank you for sharing and going there. And to this day, so you just mentioned every March, March just passed. Are there
Hmm.
things you and your wife do specifically to honor him, to, getting through, I never, I hate using the other term, like getting past it. It's working
Yeah,
through, right? It's,
sure.
like you said, that is your son. And so, you do have to find ways of that emotional management.
Hmm.
So anyway, I just want to ask you, yeah, are
Sure.
there things that you can offer as these are the things that I do to help, because you're not alone in this.
Absolutely. No, no, I appreciate that question. One of the things that I do is I have lots of male friends and their fathers and their fathers of sons, right? So usually what I do around every March, I'll send them like a few dollars or something, right?
Hmm.
But the rule is you have to do something with your son, whether it
Okay.
be take him to a game, take him to ice cream, something like that, because that's probably something I would have done with my son around his birthday,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So if there's like a big game, or like a even if it's just to just do something, whatever, right? Go to the park, like, hey man, like, listen, I think you're a great dad. This is around the time where I physically lost my son. And I just want to tell you that I think you're a great dad. I think you're doing an amazing job with your son. Here's X amount of dollars to go do that, right? And so for me, that's
Hmm.
been very helpful in, like, you know not just therapeutic for me, but also let another man, another black man, not always a black man, but usually it's a black man, somebody who looks like us, to say, hey, I see you as a father, and I see what you're doing, and I appreciate what you're doing, because and just a reminder, like, look, cherish it all, because you just never know, and
Yeah.
and to go through that, it just sucks, David. I'm just gonna be honest with you, it
Of
sucks,
course.
right?
Yeah.
There's still days where I'm like, come on, man, I did it. I thought I did it all right. But yeah, that's what I do to kind of around every time that time of year, to kind of honor my son, and to also promote black fatherhood as well.
No, I love that. I love that. And see, you're a prime example of taking the tragedy into triumph, where
Of course.
now you're spreading the love. And for myself, who I different loss, I lost my mom,
Of course.
um
Right.
the top of this year. And so at some point there is this moment where you recognize grief as being one of, if not the ultimate act of love. And it very much sounds like that's what clicked for you. And not only for yourself, but now you're literally spreading the love. You're literally creating this community through, again, the for me, experiencing this and that type of loss, that it is the ultimate act of love, because in that you really truly get to the heart of of the love for that person.
It's interesting that you mentioned grief, and so in working at a behavioral health company and stuff like that, there's something about grief that I learned, and it just dawned on me in this conversation that that's basically what I'm doing.
Hmm.
Earlier, I talked about being in the army and having a sense of service, based on
Yeah.
growing up and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
And so, in the behavioral health community, as it relates to grief, there's this notion of grieve as you live. Basically, if a person is grieving, and let's say they love to bake pies, when they're grieving, they're going to bake 1,000 pies, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
or if they're grieving, they love to cut yards, they're going to cut like every neighbor's yard until they whatever, right?
Right.
And
Right.
so it just dawned on me in this moment in this conversation with you, like that's basically what I'm doing each March. It's that service of
Yeah.
Black fatherhood and understanding that like, life is precious, and like, that bond between a father and a son is extremely precious. Not different from a father daughter or anything like that, but it's precious in its own right, special in its own right. And
Absolutely.
so that sense of service clearly has shown out over the past 8 years since my son's passing.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And that's something I was going to allude to, your service, and having that in your DNA. And here you are through again, the most powerful form of love. You are now doing it. And, one, I applaud you. And, I applaud you. I applaud you for your service, literally and figuratively. And you did touch upon, just to slightly transition. You mentioned, where you're now working as a host and producer and editor, so you're doing all the things, on this behavioral healthcare podcast.
Hmm.
Um, do you feel this is like further catharsis for you? Do you feel like this is like a further outlet for you as a host, being able to touch on behavioral health, and being able to, again, you even alluded to that with, with grief and with the show, that and how it came up for you, in the past, that is this something where you feel like it's just, I don't know, it's almost organic, that this, yes, this is part of your journey, your path.
I think so. I think so. When I started at the behavioral health company, I knew of mental health, right? I knew of
Sure.
grief, the terms of them all, right?
Yeah.
But once I started diving into the work, it really did feel like a sense of service,
Mm.
because when you hear these stories of addiction and trauma and loss and all the things that people are going through, not just in this country but around the world.
Yeah.
I definitely feel a strong sense of empathy for all of them, right? I think a lot of times when we're going through our mental health challenges, we think we're by ourselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we feel like this is only happening to me. Nobody can understand what I'm going through. But then when you hear these other stories and you start doing this catharsis in group, in community,
Mm.
you start to realize that like not only are you not by yourself, that you're actually more powerful to overcome those things in a community, right? And that community
Yeah.
doesn't have to be extremely large, right? It could be just one on one with a therapist or a counselor or something like that. But but yeah, like as I continue to do this work, it definitely is a sense of service and a sense of catharsis, because you know, man, the stories you hear, like right before we had this conversation, I just wrapped up a recording session,
Mm.
and it was rough, man. It was
Yeah.
rough. It was really rough, because the thing is like you hear these stories and you want to help, and obviously I'm not a clinician, but my job is to help tell these stories in a impactful, compassionate way, so that
Sure.
way somebody can pick up that phone and be like, hey, I heard this podcast, I went and got help, like I need to go get help, right? But when you hear these stories, I'll just say this: once you hear some of the things that happen to people, you can't unhear them. You just
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
I can delete it out the episode. I cannot make sure it sees the light of day, but you can't unhear it, right? And
Sure.
that's another reason why I've gotten back into therapy and stuff like that. But yeah, David, there's definitely this sense of service in that show, and definitely in what you do here with man to man, like, there's podcasting is great, right?
Yeah.
It's wonderful, it's cool, this that, and the other, but there's a responsibility that comes with this microphone, and I think we try our best to do the best job we can in order to get that information out there, to make sure people understand that, like, hey, it's not the end for you. Like,
Mm.
there's another chapter to this book that we can write. Let's
Yeah.
write that together,
Yeah.
right? And so, yeah, but yeah, that catharsis, that sense of service is absolutely 100% there.
No, I love it. I love it. And I love that sentiment at the end of writing a new chapter, because this book is never, your personal book is never closed. It's never finished.
Nope,
It's never finished until you put the pen down.
there it
And
is.
it can always be a new chapter if you are compelled or someone helps you to pick that pen back up. So I'm a big fan of that. So I love that. Let me
Yeah.
ask you this, because I know service is going to be part of this answer. What for you, with all the things that we've spoken about, this has been a great conversation, just being able to learn these different facets about you and your journey, and where you've come from to where you're at now. What does your daily routine look like to be able to keep you in this solid headspace, to keep you, again, going down this right path, where I just, for me, and hopefully for everyone watching and listening, it's to zoom out and see your progress and see your path. It's beautiful. It's this beautiful path of
Right.
challenge, I've learned and I've grown, challenge, I've learned and I've grown, so on and so forth, which I think life is ultimately. And I feel like, again, your story so far is a testament to it. So what do you do to keep yourself grounded, rooted, anchored on a daily basis?
Um, I mean, there's the actionable stuff, right? Like, I go for a walk every day. I feel blessed to live in a cove, right? So there's not a
Hmm.
lot of traffic, right? So I get
Yeah.
to walk in the cove every morning, and just kind of, think about not just what I have to do for that day, but also why I'm doing it, right?
Hmm.
Which I know sounds cliche, but it helps. It really does, and this goes back to the antithesis of being in that dark room playing video games every day, right?
Yeah.
So to
Yeah.
be in amongst nature, to be, amongst the birds that are always chirping in the morning. I feel like I'm in a Disney movie or something. I don't know, but but to be amongst nature really helps me. Like, it helps me immensely. And also when the sun is out, that's even better. It's almost like Superman getting that strength from the
Yeah.
sun and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But internally, between my 2 ears, I always just remind myself that, like, listen, man, like, and it kind of go back to what you were saying earlier. It's not over till I say it's over, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not over till I say it's over, right? And also just focusing on what I can control, right? Because there's certain things I can control and there's certain things I can't control, and that's probably one of the biggest things that me and the therapist today talk about, right?
Mm.
That struggle for control, and
Yeah.
focusing on what I can't control, right? But those are some of the things that I do. Go for a walk, have those internal conversations, and just appreciate life, man. Like, honestly,
Yeah.
I get the podcast for a living. Like, that's absurd. That's absurd in a good way, right? That's
Of
absurd.
course. Yeah.
It's absurd, right? I could be, I could have been T-boned at that intersection that I talked about earlier. Like,
Yeah.
that could have been done. I could have, possibly taken my own life after my son passed away physically, right? I could have
Yeah.
done that,
Yeah.
but to be in this moment with you right now, it's just a testament that, like, it's never over until you say it's over. You know what I mean? There's always this other chapter to write. There's always more you can do. There's always these people who are actually, going back to service again. I'm sorry,
No,
but
don't
that
be.
are that
Don't
are
don't be sorry.
that are
Sorry to interrupt you. Do not be sorry
okay,
about
okay,
service.
okay. But it's just, a reminder that, like, there are people who are waiting on you to be you, right? And they've poured into you, from my wife, my mom, my dad, my ex-wife, who on good terms and stuff like that.
Yeah.
They're waiting on you to be you, and so you're kind of being selfish if you don't fully live your best life and
Mhm.
ultimately achieve who you're supposed to be. And I don't like to be
Mhm.
selfish. I'm pretty sure you don't like to be selfish either, David.
No,
But I
no.
don't I don't like to be selfish. So if that is true in me, people have poured into you, just remind yourself that, like, hey, don't waste that pouring into you, whether that's monetarily, whether that's love, that's support, whatever that looks like. Just don't be afraid to be you,
Mm.
unapologetically, of course.
Yes, of course. I love that, Dominic. That was beautiful, beautiful. Man, this has been amazing. This has been. I always love when it surpasses my expectations, and this one has surpassed my expectations, and I hope everyone watching and hearing feels that. Um, Tell the good people what projects you have out there coming up or out there right now, including the Webby Award winning podcast that folks can dig into to get more of this awesome service that you, Dominic Lawson, provide.
Absolutely. So once again, David, thank you so much for having me here on Man to Man. Currently,
Absolutely.
right now, we're working on, which probably be out by the time this comes out. Working on our feature on Dory Miller and his service in the Navy and what he did on Pearl Harbor and stuff like
Mm,
that for Blackest America. It's a fascinating story that I've been working on, and so I'm just about finished writing that script.
okay.
And so I'll be getting that out here for Memorial Day and stuff like that. So that's what I'm working on. And then also simultaneously, season 2 of Recovery Replay is out right now. So I'm telling those stories of addiction and trauma and recovery from 3 different perspectives, from the person in recovery, their support person, and a clinician, that kind of wraps it all together. So those are the 2 things that I'm working on right now. You can find Recovery Replay, Black is America, and our other show, Beyond Theory, all on your major podcast platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, and all that great stuff.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Love it, love it. And you can also connect with Dominic Lawson on LinkedIn. Again, Lawson, Dominic Lawson, that is. Well, some people call me Wazicki, so I'll call you Lawson.
That's fine. Take me back to my Army days. It works. It's
Right?
fine.
Lawson. Yeah, brother, I thank you again so much for this conversation. It was a beautiful, eye opening, and heartfelt one. So, good people, make sure to touch on all 3 podcasts. This man is working. He's out there. He's doing the service and keeping that service spread wide. So tap into all the podcasts, all the projects. In the meantime, don't forget to tell another brother, king or queen, about Man to Man so we can keep the wellness revolution moving. And if you like what you're hearing, give us those 5-star reviews. Give us those 5 stars. And if there's someone you want to hear, like Dominic or someone else that we've had on Man to Man in the past, connect with me on Instagram at Wazicki, Wasicki. Till next week, peace, love, and you know it's coming, service. We out.